warm welcome to our podcast, Meet the Expert in Sport Management. This is your podcast about topics in sport management and economics and in sport governance and politics. We will always have a look at ethical issues. This podcast is a cooperation between the Johannes Gutenberg University in Mainz and the German Olympic Academy DOA. Our topic today is Ethics Management in Sport Organization, and our guest is Dr. Bram Constandt. Bram Constandt obtained his master degree in history from the Gent University with a thesis on the history of Flemish doping policy. After an additional master degree in government management, he started his PhD. In 2019, he defended his thesis about ethics management in football clubs. His research focuses mainly on how sport organizations' ethical behavior as well as unethical behavior can be prevented. He is currently a board member of the London Ethical Centre. Thanks, Bram, for being with us today. Welcome to all our listeners.
Thank you very much for your invitation. Welcome on my behalf.
Yes, great that you're here with us. As you are an expert in leadership, management, and ethical issues, I wonder if sport and all the ethical matters we have currently in sport and all the ethics codes and everything what is written makes sport then better than other areas, or at least small sports where we don't have so much money in. Are these sports better than the big sports and better than our society?
I don't think sport is better or worse than other sectors of society. Sport is just a reflection of human nature and both the best and worst kinds of human behaviors. And well, the thing is that we often see that sport is heavily mediatized, so a lot of attention is paid to the issues that are surrounding sport. But sport is not worse than society. They often use in literature the concept of bracketed morality, so morality between brackets, to refer to the fact that people, when they engage in sports, they often tend to neglect some general principles they follow in general life, such as showing respect and so forth. Think of someone engaging as a fan in a stadium and shouting at people and singing discriminatory chants, something he or she would never do outside sport. So I don't think sport is worse or better than society. It's just a reflection of it.
Yeah, I wanted to challenge you with my first question, because isn't it maybe that sport is worse than other parts of the society? Because what we learned the last years is that there is a missing trust in sport organizations. And the sport organizations started more and more to implement good governance and other measures. But I have the feeling that still the majority of the people, and our listeners may think that there's a lot of corruption and that they do not good to sport and that the sport organizations are the evil. Can you see a change in the last years or year?
Well, we haven't engaged really in doing research on such topics, but it seems like people's trust in sport organizations decreases after scandals, and it's always hard to regain trust. Trust is something that can easily be lost, and it's very difficult to retain or to recover. So it largely depends on the kind of scandals, but it's something we would like to focus on in future research projects, the extent to which scandals and issues really erode trust in sport organizations. If you would frame it otherwise, to what extent do people care whether or not people in the sport federation they support engage in financial fraud, or there are match fixing cases or doping cases? does it really make a difference in how they perceive and how they trust their sport federation? So that's really something interesting.
Your thesis about ethic management in football clubs, and you are aware of better and better ethics management, and I wonder really if this is recognized by the people in the street. Yeah.
That's certainly something to consider. Well, to what extent are people aware that their favorite sport club or their sport federation is involved in good governance and ethics management?
Have you looked in your thesis also in greenwashing, or whitewashing is the better word? Greenwashing is more for the environment, but also in whitewashing?
No, we didn't. We focused on two aspects of ethics management in particular. So ethical codes and ethical leadership, and how both can help to create an ethical climate in football clubs.
What is then the most difficult in ethical leadership? When you say leadership, where are the main obstacles when we are leading a football club or a sport federation? I think this is more or less the same at the end, but where are the obstacles of the leaders to get ethical leadership running?
Well, central to ethical leadership is role modeling and social learning, and people looking up to people in formal leadership roles and consider whether these people are reliable role models, in the sense that social exchange plays a role here as well. So if a leader shows trust and respect to people, some kind of obligation is created to return the same kinds of behaviors. So everything begins with trustworthy leadership and reliable leadership, in the fact that people should believe in what their leaders are doing, and it's not some kind of window dressing just to show off or to show being better than they actually are. No, that's an issue with ethical codes as well, that some people do not believe that ethical codes are anything more than a tick the box mentality to show on their website, look, we are engaged in ethics, but in fact they are doing nothing in practice.
Yeah, this is actually what we can observe as well, that many say, why is ethics and leadership or ethical leadership so important, as we have currently problems with COVID-19 and other major problems the sport federations have. So why is these ethical leadership so important when small federations in particular, which have not so much staff, they say, well, we cannot take care of everything, and now we have gender issues, we have racism, we have COVID, we have boycotts of our sports, and everything needs to be managed. And then we need to please our sponsors, and then we need to look that our finances are okay. And then now you come up and talk about ethical leadership or integrity officers or ethical codes. Ooh.
Yeah, that's one of the misinterpretations, that ethics management should always cost a lot and take a lot of time, but it starts with basic principles, good governance principles, transparency, democracy, accountability, and there will be always more pressing issues at the moment, always stronger integrity issues perceived to be at place. But I think in the long run, in terms of the sustainability of your organization, you have to engage in ethics management.
But isn't it enough to just have the tick box mentality, as you said, and we have a code of ethics, as many sport federations have already, or even an ethics commission or an integrity officer? If they are big enough, they have a person taking care. I think now, after you said it is all depending on role modeling, that we need the leaders of an organization to be ethically correct, then why do we need integrity officers then? Isn't it enough to have a good policy and good role models?
Yeah, integrity officers are also very important, in the sense that they are people that can be trusted to approach within an organization when you experience certain issues. It's very important to be sure that you can report safely, and that there's someone around there, you can talk about what you experienced or what you realized within the organization. So it's a policy action implementing an integrity officer that can really help to make a change on the field and outside the field of sport.
But if we are a small federation, we may not have enough money to employ an integrity officers. Or do you think they could also be volunteer integrity officers? Are they then?
Yeah, here in Flanders, Dutch-speaking part of Belgium, every federation is obliged to have a contact person integrity within the federation. It's not something that should really cost a lot of money, I believe. It's just a function, one of the functions that people within the federation should enroll in.
If we look at football clubs and the Flanders, because you did your research there, what are the main issues an integrity officer has to work with? Is it more the sexual harassment areas, as we hear a lot about that currently, or is it about match fixing, money laundering, or is it more about corruption, or whistleblower, doping? Doping, the never-ending doping discussion. So what are the main areas?
I know from being a board member at ITSES, which is the Center for Ethics in Sport here in Flanders. It's an organization subsidized by the Flemish government to help sport organizations to engage in ethical sport policies and practices. That a lot of these cases refer to the relationship between players, athletes, and their coaches. And it's not always about abuse in the sense of sexual harassment, but it can be in relation to violence or aggressive coaching, these kind of topics.
Mm-hmm. Is this typical for football, or would you say what we see in football is more or less the same in other federations as well, from your feeling?
Again, I've not studied and compared sports, but I think those kind of issues are similar in different sports. Might be different cases as well if you compare individual sports with team sports. We had, like in many other countries recently, some cases in gymnastics about the relationship between coaches and athletes, but it's not a prerequisite of gymnastics. Those kind of cases happen in other sports as well. So I'm always trying not to convey the message that football is worse than other sports, or that the real problem is in gymnastics or in tennis. Each sport on each level has its own issues, and should be aware of that.
Do you think that money plays a role? So the more money is there, that the moral, so to say, is lower when there's money involved, because people are then more bounded to economic thinking and forget about their morality?
Yeah, money makes everything more complicated in the sense that part of the theory, they often say, well, even if you realize that you have to engage in ethical behavior and you frame an issue as an ethical issue, you can still engage in it because you prioritize other motivations, and often the other motivation is financial gain. That's one of the main trade-offs, for example, you see in match fixing. That plays a role. And indeed, the more money that's involved, the more difficult it gets to make a decision.
There are different causes for all the problems we have. Certainly, as you said, coach-player or coach-athlete relation is something we always had, because this is not related to money or racism or hate or so this is also not related to money, while then the money laundering, the match fixing and corruption and so on is more related to money. So maybe money just adds additional problems to the many problems we had. So the same with doping. I don't think that the only reason is to make more money when you're doped to be a better winner. It's more the winning mentality, and that's why we had doping already 50, 100, and even in Asian Olympic Games. Doping is so this cheating to be the winner is something that is not only related to money. Or do you disagree?
Yeah, the same applies for match fixing, for example. Even during the ancient Olympics, there was match fixing, and people that were uncovered as frauds, they had to pay for certain statues around the stadium in Olympia, the Zane statues. it's a great example of the fact that we often think that ethical issues are new and novel, but many of them were already in place at the beginning of sport. And I think money adds an additional layer of complexity to many of these issues.
Do you think that certain ethical behavior is also related to the culture? So to my mind just comes the behavior of the Brazilian spectators at the Olympic Games in 2016 that were booing at the opponents of the Brazilian teams, for example. And I didn't feel good being in a stadium and the competitor comes in and they are booing, or they are very happy when in tennis the opponent is doing a mistake. And that is not a sportive behavior. But after a while, I learned that they said, no, this is our culture, how we support our team. Even though we may not agree with the culture, I got the feeling that some ethical behavior is quite much bounded to culture. What do you think about that?
That's an interesting question, something I didn't study myself, but the extent to which moral values and ethical behaviors are really universal. It could be, for example, indeed in some cultures that things are not perceived as disrespectful, for example, such as booing, whereas in other countries or other cultures it is. So we should be on guard to evaluate or analyze such cases with our Western minds, probably.
Have you analyzed anything like that in football and football fans, or is there any ethical behavior in football fans? Interesting story you can tell us?
Not directly, but football and fans are an interesting sociological case to consider in terms of forgetting certain principles and engaging in behaviors that people would never do outside the football stadium, such as booing, such as sometimes and very often engaging in racist chants and discriminatory chants. We were in Belgium, we had cases in the past that like fans of another team were chanted, but it's the same in the Netherlands and in other countries as Jews, and Jews was then like an assault in their perceptions, or they were called gays, and there's always the discussion whether or not it should be allowed because it's in a stadium. But I think we should be very careful, because a lot of people and children are looking at televisions and in the stadium in normal circumstances, how certain behaviors are implemented, and they could have the wrong idea that it's a normal way of behaving. So I think football should and football stadiums environments should at least have the same kind of minimum level respect for people and groups.
Do you think there's any ethical leadership that a football club should do with their fans or with their spectators, or are the spectators and fans other stakeholders which have nothing to do with ethical leadership in a club?
Yeah, that's in professional football. You can ask yourself the question what the exact role of fans are. Earlier on, they were considered as like passive customers. They go to the stadium, they buy merchandising and tickets. And along the way, the nature of their relationship with their club has changed. So, for example, in Germany, many of them are part of the board of professional football clubs, or even fan-led clubs. It all depends on, there's no such thing as a homogeneous group of fans. So it also depends on which kind of fan we are thinking about. But I think as of the moment, as a fan, you buy a ticket for a match, you some kind of sign a social contract that comes with certain obligations. And if you do not comply with these obligations, it's perfectly fine for a sport club or for a football club to deny your future engagement in the stadium.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much, Bram. That was interesting, and now I would like to really challenge you. I know my questions were not easy, but now I want some spontaneous answers from you. I give you 1-2 seconds to think about, or even less, and please answer 5 of the questions to our listeners. Okay, are you ready?
Okay, I'm doing my best.
Okay, so first questions. What do you like more, winning a gold medal or a trip into space?
Winning a gold medal.
Second question. What sport do you love most and why?
Currently, I think cycling, road cycling. Yeah, both actively consuming, watching on television, but also engaging in it myself. Consuming, so watching because of it's a hard sport. It had its issues in the past and it still has in terms of ethics and integrity, but it's still quite attractive in my opinion to watch and to engage in, and to do it myself because it helps me to relax and to order my thoughts.
What was the most weird cultural experience you had at the International Olympic Academy?
Huh. Perhaps just to give the listeners an idea, in the Olympic Academy, you are together with people from up to 30 different nationalities and backgrounds and cultures. So it often, gives some clashes, not to say, but some tensions. And you are divided in rooms with someone else from a wholly different background. The main issues, I did not have really a problem with it because I really like Greek food, but a lot of the people out there, they did not like at all the food that was served. And they were the more the days were running, the more frustrated they get. So that might be, well, it's not really a strange experience, but it was something that I still recall. That they were getting angry because they missed their usual food.
Okay, when we are at food, then my next question is also related to food. Be ready and answer very quick, very, very quick. What do you like most? Belgian fries, Belgian chocolate, or Belgian waffles?
Belgian fries, followed by Belgian chocolate.
Okay, okay. So then my last question. What ethical changes would make you most happy regarding the Olympic Games?
Perhaps a more focus on sustainability issues, and downsizing or downscaling the Olympics might be a good idea.
Okay, thank you very much, Bram. Bram Constandt, thanks for being our guest, and
My pleasure.
listening to you. Bye bye.
Thank you very much.